The morning light came slow over the plains, spilling gold to the thinning mist. Fences stood like old scars across the land, and the wind whispered in the brittle grass. Clara Boone split kindling on her porch, the steady rhythm of the axe her only company. That was when she saw the figure, slouched in the saddle, swaying with the motion of a tired horse. Dust clung to him like a second skin, and even at a distance, she could tell something was wrong. He stopped at her gate, not dismounting, just lifting his head enough for her to see the shadow of a beard and eyes dulled by pain. "Just a sip of water, ma'am," he said, the words rasping out like dry leaves in wind. Clara's grip tightened on the handle of the axe. She'd learned not to trust the polite tones of strangers. Too many men could lace poison into them. But he swayed again in the saddle, and something in her chest tugged against the caution she'd built over 3 hard years. She set the axe aside, poured from the pitcher on the porch, and crossed to the gate. When she held out the cup, his hand brushed hers, rough palm, warm despite the chill, and he drank like a man who hadn't tasted kindness in weeks. Up close, she saw the tear in his shirt, the dark stain spreading from beneath his ribs. "You're hurt," she said. "It's nothing," he replied, though the way he braced against the saddle horn told her otherwise. "Get down," she said, not sharp, but with the tone of someone who expected to be obeyed. He hesitated, then swung a leg over, boots landing unsteady on the packed earth. He stood taller than she expected, his shoulders broad but his frame leaning as if against some invisible wind. She saw him glance toward the porch rail, where her husband's old revolver lay within reach. In the shade of the porch, she pulled a chair forward. "Sit." He did, one hand pressed lightly to his side. She fetched a basin, cloth, and the last of the carbolic. As she cleaned the wound, a shallow graze, but angry from dust and neglect, he kept his gaze fixed on the horizon. "You've come far," she said. He gave a short nod. "Far enough." She waited for more, but it didn't come. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the steady rasp of cloth on skin. She could smell trail dust on him, horse sweat, and the faint iron of blood. When she was done, she stepped back. "There's a barn," she said. "You can rest there tonight. I won't trouble you long. That's your choice." By midday, word had already traveled. The first to arrive was Sheriff Reeves, his gelding kicking up small clouds along the lane. He dismounted slow, touching the brim of his hat in greeting. "Clara," he said, "I hear you've got company." She folded her arms. "If you're here to tell me be careful, I already know." The sheriff's eyes flicked toward the barn. Jonah McGraw's the name. Worked the trail for years. Troubles followed him since a killing down in Abilene. Some say it was self-defense. Others, he let the rest hang. Clara didn't ask what she believed. "He's hurt. That's all I see right now." Reeves studied her a moment, then nodded once. "You got a good heart, but be sure it doesn't get you burned." He mounted and rode back toward town, leaving the smell of horse and the faint rattle of tack behind him. In the barn, Jonah was tending his horse, movement slow but precise. She leaned on the doorway. "Sheriff knows you," she said. His hands paused on the bridle. Figured he might. "Should I be worried?" He met her eyes, and for a heartbeat she thought he might lie. But his voice was even when he said, "Not if you keep that revolver handy." That night, the wind rose, carrying the scent of rain. Clara lay awake, listening to the barn creak. She imagined a man out there, lying on old hay with the quilt she left folded at the foot of the stall. She'd told herself it was to keep him from catching cold. But some part of her knew it was also to keep him tethered here, if only for another day. In the morning, she found him at the well, drawing water like he belonged there. He didn't speak as he carried the bucket to the trough. Didn't ask if she minded him doing it. She watched from the porch, an unfamiliar heat curling low in her chest. Not attraction, exactly, but a recognition of someone who moved with the quiet assurance of work done honestly. The days that followed were measured in small, wordless exchanges. Her setting a coffee cup on the porch rail without being asked. Him mending the hinge on her gate without telling her he'd done it. Neither of them named the arrangement taking shape, but it was there in the way he left her tools cleaned and in the way she found herself watching the road more often than before. One evening, as the sun bled orange over the horizon, Hoofbeats sounded down the lane. Two men rode up, local hands she recognized from the Mercer spread. They reined in at the gate, eyes sliding over her before settling on the barn. "Didn't think you took in strays, Mrs. Boone," one said, voice thick with amusement. She didn't answer. The other leaned forward on his saddle horn. "Mr. Mercer says it ain't safe out here with a man like that. Says he'd be glad to take this place off your hands if it's too much for you." Before she could speak, Jonah stepped from a barn. His shirt sleeves were rolled, showing a line of muscle in his forearms, and his gaze was level. "Gate's closed," he said. "Best you keep riding." The riders lingered just long enough to make it clear they left by choice, not because they'd been told. When they were gone, Jonah looked at her, but she didn't thank him. She only said, "They'll be back." He nodded once. "Then I'll be here." That night, the wind dropped, leaving the world too quiet. From her porch, Clara could see the faint light spilling through a crack in the barn wall. Jonah's shadow moved inside, steady, unhurried. She realized with a start that she wasn't wondering whether he'd leave in the night. She was wondering what would happen when he stayed. The frost had melted into thin ribbons of mud along the yard, and Jonah was already out in it when Clara stepped onto the porch. He worked the broken fence rail loose, his shoulders moving in a slow, deliberate rhythm, the morning light catching in his sandy hair. She carried 2 tin cups of coffee, setting one on the fence post without a word. He glanced at it, then at her, a flicker of acknowledgement passing between them before he took a sip. Work became their language. He dug post holes. She steadied the plumb line. She handed him nails. He handed her the hammer. The pauses between their words were not empty, but filled with the quiet cadence of shared purpose. Even the air seemed to change, less guarded, more willing. By midday, the sun warmed the earth enough for the scent of damp soil to rise. Jonah leaned on the shovel, his limp more pronounced from the morning's labor. Clara noticed, but she didn't tell him to stop. Pride was a fragile thing, and she learned not to touch it unless she meant to break it. That evening, they ate at the small table in her kitchen. The stew was simple, potatoes, carrots, a bit of beef, but Jonah ate with gratitude that made her want to look away. Between bites, he spoke of the trail, of nights under cold stars and days when the horizon never seemed to move. His voice dipped when he spoke of Abilene. A card game gone wrong, a man with a short temper, the way the room had turned against him before the body had even cooled. He didn't offer excuses. She didn't ask for them. When he felt quiet, she told him about her husband's death. No gunfight, no heroics, just a skittish horse and a bad fall during a cattle drive. Her tone was flat, but her hand stilled on the edge of the bowl. Jonah's gaze lingered there on her stillness, as if he could read more in the silence than in the words. The next day, trouble came in the shape of Silas Mercer. He arrived with 2 ranch hands, his chestnut stallion churning up clods of earth in the yard. Silas tipped his hat to Clara, ignoring Jonah entirely. "Word is you got company," he said, his voice warm in the way of a snake basking in the sun. "That can be dangerous for a woman on her own." Clara kept her chin level. "I'm not on my own." Silas's smile thinned. "Mercer land backs yours. Be ashamed if some drifter's trouble spilled over." His eyes slid toward the barn, where Jonah stood in the doorway, rag in hand. Jonah didn't move at first. Then he stepped forward, stopping just short of the fence line. "Gate's closed," he said, his voice low but carrying. The space between the men filled with an unspoken measure, each weighing the other. Silas's gaze hardened, but he turned his horse without a word. The hands followed, leaving a churned path in the damp earth. Clara exhaled only when the sound of hooves faded. Jonah glanced her way, but she didn't thank him. Gratitude could make a man think he'd earned a place, and she wasn't ready to decide if he had. That night, she carried a folded wool blanket to the barn. Jonah took it with a quiet thank you, his eyes steady on hers. She hesitated before turning away, saying, "Sometimes people don't need saving, just someone who won't walk away." In the dark, Jonah lay on the hay, the blanket heavy over him. He thought of the way she'd said it, not as a kindness, but as a truth she'd paid for in hard coin. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying with the faint sound of hoofbeats far down the road, circling where the night was thickest. He knew without seeing that Silas wasn't finished. The storm came in hard, riding the wind like a thing alive. Rain lashed the roof in sheets, rattling the shutters and drumming against the tin in the barn. Jonah moved among the restless horses, his voice low, steady, calming them as lightning tore the sky into white bones. Clara was inside the house, fastening the last of the shutters when she caught it. Faint and wrong, the flicker of torchlight in the distance. She stepped onto the porch, rain biting her face. 3 riders emerged from the dark, torches burning steady despite the wind. Silas rode in front, his oilskin coat shedding water, his mouth set in something between a grin and a snarl. "McGraw," he called over the storm. "Time you came out and faced what's due." Jonah stepped into the rain without hurry, water soaking his shirt to the skin. The lamplight from the house cut a thin gold edge along his jaw. "If you got business with me," he said, "you can speak it here." Silas's horse sidestepped in the mud. "My business is keeping decent folk safe. You're a troublemaker, and trouble don't belong near this place." His eyes shifted to Clara on the porch. Or near her. Clara lifted the shotgun she'd kept hidden behind the door. The rain slicked the barrel, but her hands were steady. "You've said your piece. Now ride on." For a long moment, the only sound was the rain between them. Jonah didn't move closer, but there was a weight in his stillness, a quiet refusal that pulled the air tight. Silas's men shifted in their saddles, glancing at each other. "You'd stand with him?" Silas asked Clara, his voice low and ugly. "I stand on my land," she said, "and I decide who's welcome here." Jonah's gaze flicked toward her, brief but sharp, as though something in him had anchored. He turned back to Silas. "Best you go before this gets worse." Lightning flared, and for an instant the rain was frozen in silver arcs around them. Then Silas swore, spurred his horse, and wheeled away. The other 2 followed, their torches vanishing into the dark like dying stars. Inside, Clara set the shotgun against the wall, her hands only now beginning to tremble. Jonah stood dripping in the doorway, watching her as if trying to memorize the sight. "I should be gone by morning," he said. Her eyes found his. "Or you could stay. Come spring, I could use the help." The words hung between them, not quite invitation, not quite challenge. Jonah's breath came slow. "That what you want?" She didn't look away. "It's what I'm saying." He stepped inside, the storm's roar softening behind him. Without ceremony, he reached for her hand. Not to claim, not to bind, but to hold. His palm was warm despite the chill, his grip steady as if they were bracing each other against something unseen. Neither spoke. The fire hissed in the stove, the scent of wet earth seeping into the room. Outside, the rain eased a softer rhythm, the kind that lingers long after the worst is past. Later, when he returned to the barn for the night, Jonah paused under the eaves, listening to the slow drip from the roof. He thought how many nights he'd spent moving on, and how, for the first time in years, the road ahead didn't pull at him. From the porch, Clara stood watching, her figure framed by the warm light spilling from the doorway. She didn't call to him. She didn't need to. Far down the road, beyond the reach of lamplight, a single rider sat motionless in the dark, rain still running off his hat brim. Silas had not gone far.